peace and serenity of this land was once a source of trauma and horror for Manus Campbell. It has been 50 years since the New Jersey native first became a combatant in the Vietnam War. He was only 19 years old. Serving in the Marine Corps 4 Battalion 1 in the then DMZ from June 1967 to July 1968, Campbell's return to the United States would only be the beginning of years trying to overcome trauma experienced from his year at war. In 2007, a 10-day visit to Vietnam marked a turning point for the American veteran. He began supporting children's education and welfare in the country with his organization Helping the Invisible Victims of War, or HIVAL. His charity work have continued throughout the years, seeing him eventually settle down in Huế and now Hội An town. Hello and welcome to this edition of Talk Vietnam. Now, as you have seen in the previous clip, you might have guessed that our guest today has had a history with Vietnam that goes back to the war days, but it is actually his present stories and healing journey here in the country that are truly inspirational. We're very lucky in our Talk Vietnam today to have the presence of American veteran Manus Campbell as he shares with us his reconnection with the land that he once called a battleground. Hello, Mr. Campbell.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us here on our show.
Thank you.
We begin now with your organization, the non-governmental organization called Helping Invisible Victims of War that you founded in 2009. Tell us about this organization. Who were the victims that you were trying to help?
Well, I came back for the first time in 2006, and I was introduced to a school for disabled children in Hue. And I spent 2 days there observing the school and having conversations with the nuns and the people there. And I was very touched by the children and how they responded to me. And I decided that I wanted to help them. So my main focus of my organization is in educating children of Vietnam.
With the organization, what was your main mission in establishing helping HIVAL, as we know it as short?
My initial wish was to build a orphanage for the children. So in this school there are a minimum of 30 children that sleep in the classrooms of the school. And some of them are true orphans, but others are, their parents are working, and so they leave them at the school full time. Maybe they take them home on weekends, or they leave them there for as long as a month. So my initial request was for money to help build an orphanage.
You mentioned now that this all started from a visit of you to the school for disabled children. Tell us about that first experience meeting disabled children here in Vietnam. How did that experience touch you?
Well, it was, I believe it was destiny for me. I met a woman in an internet shop, and she wanted to sell me a tour to the DMZ where I was during the war, and I started laughing. I said I was about peace, and so she said, "Are you a Buddhist?" And I said yes, and she told me about the nun that started the school. And then I spent the next 2 days in the school, and the kids were, you know, very cute and warm and, you know, welcoming to me. And I was touched by their condition and how, you know, they didn't have clean water. They didn't have toothbrushes or soap. You know, their diet was very not enough food. So I was touched, and I just wanted to make their conditions in the school better, and to make them happy. You know, I think that's the most important thing you can do for a child, is to make them happy, to bring joy. And they, in my interactions with them, they gave me joy back in return. You know, I'm a firm believer in that there's no difference between giving and receiving. When you give, you receive back.
Alongside supporting the school, originally first school that started your journey in Vietnam, in Hue, you are also now sponsoring a number of children at a foundation called the Kỳ Anh Foundation. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about your work here?
Well, I left Hue after 3 years, and I came here, and one of the first persons I talked to when I said I was thinking about coming here, he said, "Oh, you should meet Nick and Jackie." And I go to Kỳ Anh and I see their program, and I'm very impressed that they have such a grasp on taking care of the children. The staff ratio between students is very low, and so I first started sponsoring a couple of children, and then I kept increasing it, and then I got some of my American friends that were here to sponsor another group of maybe 8 or 10 children.
How is such environment, you know, being able to be in school and being able to interact with other people such as yourself, how do you think such experience are conducive to the development of children and kind of helping them to overcome their disability?
That's one of the things that I learned, was that these children were, if they were not in school, they were home on the bed or on the floor watching TV. And when they came to school, they had friends, they had peers, they had someone that looked like them or had the same disability as them, and they had friends. They were, you know, good friends, and so I wanted to promote in the neighborhood for local people to come to the school on the weekends and just be with the children, sit on the swing with them, and just talk to them. It makes a big difference.
Today, Manus pays a visit to the Kỳ Anh Foundation Day Center, located in Điện Bàn district of Quảng Nam province.
Long time no see.
The co-founder of the foundation is British native Jackie Rafter. The Day Center provides free care and education to 102 children living with different types of developmental disabilities in the northeastern part of Quảng Nam province. The foundation came up with the idea of setting up the Day Center back in 2008 and then took 4 years to complete the school.
Over the years, we found because there were not many services for children with special needs in the area, a lot of families who had children with special needs were starting to put them in the orphanage, which was quite traumatic for the children and the families. So that's when we had the idea to set up this centre that would be like a school and a therapy centre, a one-stop centre for kids with special needs.
As one of the sponsors at the center, Manus regularly visits the children here. Ranging from young babies and toddlers to teenagers, the students are provided with therapy and skills education tailored to each of their needs.
Em tên là Nguyễn Tô Hòn Khoa, năm nay em 17 tuổi. Ở trường em chỉ học môn toán, môn tiếng Việt, môn vận động tô và có cả môn tiếng Anh nữa.
Wow! Hua is a good friend of Manus and speaks in English with Manus whenever he visits.
Và mình đi chờ người đó yêu, có tấm lòng yêu quý trẻ.
Cái sự xuất hiện của bác ở trung tâm mà mỗi lần bác lên á thì trẻ nó chạy tới và mình thấy cái hình ảnh của bác nó giống như là một ông già Noel, cho nên mình cũng hay trêu bác là Hello Santa Claus. Bác rất là đồng cảm với cái không gian ở đây và rất là đồng cảm với mọi cái công việc của chúng tôi.
Manus contributes monthly to sponsoring the education and needs of multiple children at the center.
Without people like Manus, who are as generous as Manus, we really wouldn't be able to carry out our work. But they love Manus, yeah. Well, they've known him for some years now, so they're quite used to seeing him, but they know he's a very kind person. I think they can really sense that from him, that he's a very kind and open person, and that if they interact with Manus, they're going to get a good response.
Currently, there are 120 children on the waiting list to enroll into the school. The Điện Bàn district's authorities have been working with Kiang, allotting the foundation extra land adjacent to the center to ensure successful expansion of the day center for special needs children in the area.
Let's wind back now in time to 1967. This is when you joined the U.S. Marines.
Yes.
What were you doing at that point?
So I was at a high school, maybe, I can't remember exactly, but maybe 8 or 9 months. And I got my draft notice that I had to report for the military. And I remember the shock of that and the meaning of, you know, because at that point, 1965, 66, the war started to escalate. And the pages of the newspapers were filled with the amount of people that were killed. And at the same time, 5 of my other friends that I was close with also got their draft notice. So one day, we all went to a recruiter, and I was the only one that joined the Marines, 2 joined the Army, and 1 the Navy, and 1 the Air Force.
Tell us more about the feelings back then, knowing that you were going to go into this battleground.
So it really didn't hit home until I got my orders to go to Vietnam, and then I was giving 1 month of leave before I could go. So, you know, it was a countdown, you know, for me. And my way of dealing with it was drinking. So I drank a lot of alcohol.
Even before you left?
Yes, I was worried.
Yes. Tell us about your posts in Vietnam.
In the beginning, we were security for building a road between Phu Bai and the Ao Choa Valley. So it was very quiet. There was no one there but us and the CBs, the construction. But then I think we got relieved by another unit, and then we went to Quang Tri. Eventually, the Tet offensive started, and we were at the DMZ. I spent pretty much 4 to 6 months on the DMZ.
Tell us about this time. I mean, obviously, there are images and stories and experiences that still stick with you until today.
It was an operation, and we were the security for the colonel and the brass, and so we didn't have to go. We were backup, and then all of a sudden we start to hear all kinds of crying for support on the radio and gunfights going on. So the next thing we know, we are sent to the left and then the right, and to come up this stream where these Marines were pinned down by the snipers had tied themselves in the trees. We came to where there were 50, 60 Marines that were laying in the stream, either dead or dying from from gunshot wounds, missing limbs, and they were screaming, "I'm too young to die. I want my mother." And So it was overwhelming. You know, myself and another Marine, we just sat on the side of the stream, and we were in shock. We couldn't do anything. I didn't know what to do.
Yes. How did such memory kind of continue to stay with you over the years? I mean, these are images obviously not easily forgotten.
No, they're not forgotten. The two things that, you know, the mind wants to do when it encounters is run or freeze. I couldn't run, so I froze. And it was, I became like a block of ice. So the image of the stream would come to me, and I would just push it away because it was fearful and I didn't want to deal with fear. So one of the things was, I felt guilty that I didn't hold somebody that was dying, and I didn't do first aid, that I didn't, why did this happen? Why couldn't I prevent this from happening? This shouldn't happen, but it did happen. The stream. This stream ripples through me like a tsunami wave or a howling wind. It feels like my canoe is overturned. I'm upside down with the weight of 10 canoes filled with dead and wounded Marines on my shoulders, pushing me straight down into the water filled with blood and ghosts. There was the silence filled with the screams. There were the screams filled with beginnings, endings, pleads to God. I'm too young to die. I want my mother. Death-curdling screams of terror were like bullets entering and tearing at my heart and soul. Little did I know I would carry them until I die.
Do you remember what going back to America was like that first day when you left Vietnam and you came back to your country after having gone through such pain and horror?
Well, they prepare you for war, but they don't prepare you for returning from war. Your life is turned upside down. You have a wound. It's a soul. It's a wound on your soul. I think that for most veterans that came here, Americans, something died here inside of them. I would drink maybe half a bottle of gin or vodka before I would leave my house to go to a bar with my friends because I needed the courage to face the world, because my world was very dangerous. And so, you know, a lot of veterans to this day, they don't like to go where there's a lot of people because you're at a risk. In their mind, they're at a risk.
You suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. How did that manifest itself in your daily life?
2 years after I came home, I got married, and my wife would tell me that I woke up screaming, you know, and so you're being triggered all the time. The feeling will come back. The sound of a helicopter, you know, during the war, the helicopter was either bringing you food or water, or you were riding on one about to be shot down out of the sky, or just smells. You know, I remember the smells of Vietnam, you know, the wood cooking and those kind of things just put you right back.
In the years after the war, in your life in the U.S., tell us about one of your, you know, one of the points where you felt were one of the lowest in your life.
I had a career after the war. I was a New Jersey state policeman, and it was the only thing I knew: carrying a gun and you know, putting on a bulletproof vest. I could do that. I did that, but after 10 years, I realized this is not for me. And then I started working with kids. I tried to get kids off it, and my own recovery, when I stopped drinking, I tried to teach that to children in high school. When I was working with these kids, I got in a car accident. I was hit by 2 cars on the way to work. And so I stopped working. But it was like a post-traumatic stress incident again, because my life was okay, and then all of a sudden I was very vulnerable and hurt. And so for, I think, 3 or 4 years I didn't work. And I had my pension from the state police, but I couldn't live on that alone. So I lived on my credit cards. So I had like $30,000 in debt in credit cards, but I couldn't work. I would look in the paper for a job. There was nothing. My mind would say, I can do that. You know, the simplest thing. I was so depressed. My marriage was crumbling. I decided I was going to go to the monastery for 6 months.
Over 40 years after the Vietnam War has ended, 271,000 Vietnam vets in the United States still suffer from some type of war zone-related post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. This is according to a 2015 study published on the JAMA Psychiatry, an American Medical Association monthly journal. More than a third of the veterans who have current war zone PTSD also have major depressive disorder. For Campbell, nightmares, anxiety, depression, and drinking became daily symptoms of the disorder. He has since found peace through meditation retreats. Photography of the land and people of Vietnam have also been contributive factors to his healing process. Above all, it is the connections that he has made here with the people that have allowed him the strength to confront his past.
What led you to that decision, and why into kind of meditation and Buddhism?
It was very early on, in maybe 1977, I started to think about meditation and took a weekend course. And I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want anybody to know I was doing this, because it was like, you know, far out, you know. I didn't even tell my wife. And I went, and the first time I meditated, I said, wow. I started seeing things on my street that I had never seen before. So I continued with it, and it was like a process of discovering. I was searching. I was looking to find something that would change me or make me feel better.
Tell me about how your path into meditation helped you to kind of face your past.
I stopped drinking. It was the last time I drank. This was 1986, and I started a meditation group in my home on Friday night, and then I started to explore meditation. And when I just started to discover I was causing my own pain, I learned tools how to deal with strong emotion, where before I'd go to the refrigerator and take a beer.
When did you first come back to Vietnam, and tell us about this decision to come back to Vietnam?
Well, I'm a traveler. I love to travel. This was in January of 2006. And I participated in a meditation retreat in Bodh Gaya. And on the retreat in Bodh Gaya, I had the thought, maybe now I can go back to Vietnam. And it was a strong, like, push. And so the next few months, I researched and read about what was going on here. And I actually read about one of my friends that was living here, Chuck Searcy, who said that every veteran should come back and get new images of Vietnam in their heads. The day after Christmas, I flew to Ho Chi Minh, and I wanted to avoid anything related to the war. I did go to the War Museum in Ho Chi Minh. I did want to pay my respects at My Lai, and so I did that, and then I came here to Hoi An, and then I went to Hue, and it was a total of 10 days.
Did you find that that visit contributed to your healing process and this process of you kind of facing your past?
Yeah, sure it did. And one of the things that happened was that I committed myself to sending money to the children in the school. And then that had some effect on me. I felt like I was making amends, that I was, doing something good. And it like broke the ice. I had been back to Vietnam. Not many people, have the courage to do that.
You also kind of helped in the organizations of bringing other veterans from the United States back to Vietnam. Can you tell us about that?
A group of veterans started a chapter in Da Nang called, it's part of the national chapter of Veterans for Peace. And they started a yearly tour. The first one was in 2012. And they brought back, I think, around 14 or 15 people. It's positive because they see the work that the veterans that live here full time, what they're doing, the positive effect they're having, and they really kind of update their own information about Vietnam.
As a veteran who came back to Vietnam, what would be your message to other veterans out there who are still contemplating the thought of coming back or who are still quite reserved about that idea?
It's an opportunity to come back and face those demons and your fears and your former enemy and drink coffee with them or drink beer with them or learn about, we certainly didn't know anything about Vietnam. It was not in the history books or, we just knew it was very far away, but we had no idea about the culture and what we were doing.
In your years of staying here in Vietnam, you've also bonded with a number of veterans who are not American, but actually Vietnamese veterans. Yeah. Tell us about this friendship that you formed with, people who were on the opposite battlefront, who you barely knew anything about back in those days.
Right. The first encounter I had with veterans was in 2012. I was invited to a dinner in Hanoi with 6 or 8 Vietnamese veterans, and four Americans and 2 other Americans that weren't veterans. And we sat at this big round table at a restaurant and looked each other in the eye. And there were a couple of speeches. One guy who said, I wish you all good health so that we can meet again. And it was, for me, it was like, wow, this is the richest thing that can happen, is when veterans from different sides come together and see that, we want the same thing.
Manus is in the outskirts of Hanoi in Bat Chang village, visiting a close friend.
Okay.
Mr. Phạm Văn Đông is a Vietnamese veteran who was based in Khe Sanh in Quang Tri, also in 1967, the same year Manus was stationed in the region. They were fighting on opposite battlefronts. A chance encounter during Manus' travel to Bat Chang 2 years ago have resulted in the 2 veterans becoming friends.
Vì cái xuất phát là là tôi thấy là ông ấy là một cựu chiến binh Mỹ mà bây giờ ông lại làm từ thiện, thì chính vì cái chuyện đó cho nên tôi rất quý ông. Tôi mời ông về chơi thì từ đó hai anh em là cứ thân nhau thì cứ đi lại.
Instantaneously, everything was very comfortable. It was as if we had known each other for a long time. And for me, it was very meaningful because he could tell me about his life during the American war here, and which was very meaningful for me to hear the other side.
Dome and Manus regularly send one another poetry about the war days. Dome has even visited Manus in Hội An. The duo's friendship has bridged the gap that once separated opposite fronts.
Cái đó thuộc về quá khứ, chiến tranh đó thì rồi nó cũng qua đi thôi. Nó qua đi thì giữa con người của mình và con người của Hoa Kỳ thì cũng đều là hai con người, mà hai con người đều con người tốt cả. Giữa tôi và Manus là có hai cái trùng hợp là hai người cùng thích làm những cái điều thiện, cho nên chúng tôi hợp nhau.
After the war was over, we resumed our lives, and we started to undo what the war had done to us, and we became human again. And we opened our hearts, and we said, okay, this happened in the past, and now we can be friends.
Now, talking about continuing your work with different charities and foundations, if I may ask, throughout the years, how have you been able to fund, the resources, the financial help, assistance that you send to these different organizations, or to sponsor the different children?
You know, in the very beginning, when I started my own NGO. And even before I moved here, I was sending out mailings and raising money. So everybody connected with my story. They were inspired. I got lots of money from people that could relate to my story. And for myself, I realized that, during the war, this was my hell, right? And now I was choosing to live in a past hell. And so it was full circle. So the money came for the first 2 or 3 years. I had no problem with raising money. But then distance, not being connected with people, I don't have the energy to raise money. I don't want to go back there and ask people for money. So I used my own money. So I continued to support the same way I was before, but it was my money. I have a pension for being a state policeman, and I have a pension because I suffer from PTSD. So I get deposits in my bank every month, the first day of the month. So that's the money I use. I use some of it to help and some of it to live.
What are some of the projects that you've done here in Vietnam that have been most meaningful for you?
Of course, the education, I think it's the most important thing that can be done for a child is to put them in school. So that's always been at the top of my list. And because of the Agent Orange legacy, I believe that some of the children are affected, the disabled children are affected by Agent Orange. So that's another thing that is a priority for me.
Manus is joining in a meeting to update information from another foundation that he has been supporting in Hội An since 2014. Australian couple Linda and Graham Byrne are the founding director and in-country managers of the Children's Education Foundation, or CEF.
Our purpose is to educate girls who can't afford to go to school. Most of them come from very impoverished situations, and some of them come from marginalized situations.
Manus is currently sponsoring the education of 9 girls in the foundation. He is meeting some of these sponsored students at CEF today. Many are nearing the end of high school, after receiving the financial assistance from Manus and the organization.
Năm trong mẹ mang lớp 9 là mẹ em bị bạn qua đời. Thì bạn ung thư. Trừ thì chỉ còn bo đi luồn. Em cảm thấy rất là vui và em bất ngờ khi được chú giúp đỡ vì số tiền để mình có thể trang trải trong học tập. Em có thể thêm vào tiền để đi học thêm và nộp các khoản học phí rồi bảo hiểm như kia trên trường.
His money helps him stay in school and finish that year. And then his next donation helps him finish the following year. And the goal is to get all those 9 through school and maybe even help them with university. He's been amazing. He's an incredibly compassionate person, very caring, very loving. He gives unconditionally, which is very rare.
Today, Manus is also giving out his bike to one of the students.
I found this for you.
She has had to catch rides with friends in order to get to school in the past years.
Trong tương lai thì em muốn có một công việc thật tốt để không có phụ lòng người đã hỗ trợ cho em đi học tập. Em cảm ơn bác rất nhiều vì đã giúp em được học tập tiếp trong con đường mà em tới tương lai của em. Và em chúc bác có một sức khỏe dồi dào.
In continuing your work to support the different projects that you have here in Vietnam, what is the message that you would like to send through your actions?
I would love for the rest of the world to learn from the Vietnamese people about forgiveness and moving on. I think the world is such a mess in so many ways, and here, you know, where I can come back and, you know, we can get along. We can help each other, right?
Yes. Now, this year marks the 50th anniversary, is that right, of the year when you first left the United States to embark on your duty in Vietnam,
Right.
1967. Do you feel like you've completely healed?
That's a good question. I don't think I completely healed, but I think I get a little bit better every day. I still wake up not feeling. Again, I mentioned loneliness. So I'm single. I wake up in the morning and I feel that aloneness.
What are your hopes, future hopes for the children whom you sponsor, the many projects that you're working on here in Vietnam?
Well, I love the kids I help, and I feel very privileged to have them in my life. I don't have any of my own children, but I certainly feel like I have at least 100.
Thank you so much, Mr. Campbell, for sharing your story. Your journey of healing has certainly been very inspirational to myself, and I hope to the audience is watching. And I hope that you will continue that journey in healing each day and continue your good work here in Vietnam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And that is also wrapped up this edition of Talk Vietnam with Mr. Manus Campbell, an American veteran on his journey of healing and also helping others here in Vietnam. We have enjoyed this edition, and we'll see you more next time here on Talk Vietnam. Goodbye for now.